IDS Talks is a podcast dedicated to helping corporations and law firms find new and effective ways to leverage data, giving them a decisive advantage both in and out of the courtroom.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of IDS Talks. My name is Jonathan Sachs, Chief Revenue Officer at IDS, and today I'm joined by Robert Kirtley to talk about navigating the complex world of data management in law firms. Robert is IDS's Director of Cybersecurity and Information Governance. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning.
Good morning. Some of our listeners may not know you, so let's start with your background.
Certainly. I've been doing cybersecurity for a couple of decades now. Started out with Deloitte Consulting, was a partner there, spent 12 years there, 12 wonderful years. Then left to join a firm called Duff & Phelps, which a lot of people may not know. We grew the cybersecurity practice there pretty aggressively through acquisitions. And in fact, our last acquisition in security was Kroll, and then subsequently changed the name of Duff & Phelps to Kroll. So I spent 10 years there, helped take the company public. We did an IPO. It was wonderful. After that, spent about 4 years as an instructor, basically full-time for SANS, and traveled the world, but was traveling the world. So last 5 years, I've been with IDS working on cybersecurity, information governance, compliance, those sorts of things.
And we're going to go with those have been the best 5 years, Robert.
Yes.
Right. Of course they are.
Of course they are.
Robert is also my go-to guy if I'm like, this email seems like it's a little fishy. You get that, Robert? See, a little fishy. Or, hey, I think my dad has been scammed. But it's great to have Robert on our team. Has helped a number of our clients in the world of both IG, information governance, and cyber. And so, Robert, today we're going to hit on both of those areas, but specifically focused on law firms. And let me start with this first question for you. Law firms handle vast amounts of sensitive and confidential data, not just their data, right, but their clients' data. So could you highlight some specific challenges that law firms encounter regarding data security, compliance, and privacy regulations?
Absolutely. I guess probably one of the biggest issues that law firms have is, unlike most other companies, the most valuable things that they have aren't actually things that they're generated by themselves. So the highest risk data is the data they get from clients, which means that they have no control over how that data was generated. They often have no control over how they receive that data. Clients want to send zip files. They want to send attachments to emails. They might want to send a DVD or CD-ROM that they've burned. They may want to send a USB hard drive. They may, in some cases, I've had clients having to deal with boxes of paper. So a lot of times law firms don't have control over how data comes into the organization. Regardless, they need to be able to manage that data. And because of the nature of how law firms work, a lot of times different partners want to access the data in radically different ways. So I've got law firm clients where the partners still want to see physical paper copies, which involves printing. I've got law firms where clients want to see stuff on screen, online, in relativity, and that's the only way they're going to interact with data. What we need to be able to do in supporting the law firm doing their job, serving their clients, is security professionals. We need to find ways to say, yes, we can accept this data, and here's how we're going to do it. Or yes, we can provide access to that data, and here's how we're going to do it. The reality is, though, is a lot of times we don't know what's in that data. We may almost inevitably, we're going to have some PII. We're going to have sensitive information. We're going to have potentially protected health information. We may even get payment card information. So there's all sorts of data, laws, rules, and regs that we need to comply with. And that should be transparent to the counsel, the attorney working with that data. So as security professionals, what we need to be able to do is provide platforms that allow them to do their job, while at the same time ensuring that we have the ability as an IT organization, as a security organization, to ensure that we're compliant with laws, rules, regulations, and also contractual obligations that we have to our clients.
Yeah. You couldn't see it, Robert, but I was twitching a little bit when you made the reference to how some partners at law firms, maybe you didn't say partners, but I thought of partners at law firms when I was working in law firms as a lawyer. And I had one partner in particular who wanted everything printed out and put into a 3-ring binder because he would take a car service to and from home, and he would work off of those binders in the car. And his mindset was, I can bill the clients for the work in the car, and the amount I bill is more than the cost of the car service, so I'm being efficient. I, of course, was thinking, but now I've got a copy of data documents sitting in a 3-ring binder that I don't ever see those 3-ring binders when we're done with them. So, of course, to our listeners, this was many years ago. Robert has his experience over the past couple of decades. We won't say how long ago it was when I was at the law firm. Instead, let's move to the next question, Robert. Having just shared the challenges, what strategies should law firms consider to both effectively strike the balance between accessibility to the data and security and compliance requirements that may apply to the data?
Yeah, so I said this a couple of seconds ago, but the reality is that we don't have, usually as an IT organization or a security organization or a commingled group of folks providing the services, we don't have the option to say no to the attorneys. So what we have to come up with is, what are the mechanisms we can use? What are the tools we can use? What are the controls we can put in place to ensure that attorneys can do the job they need to be able to do? At the end of the day, serving clients is how, like you said, we need to bill hours. And if we make it difficult for our teams to do that, if there's too many hoops for them to jump through, or we have stringent requirements and limitations on the technology platforms that we offer to the law firm, that potentially puts at risk our ability to generate revenue through billing, may make the attorneys inefficient, may make some documents inaccessible, which would obviously be really problematic. And sometimes attorneys don't know what they don't know about what they can't see. So we need to
Right.
ensure that we provide ways for them to do their job, while at the same time ensuring that we strike the balance between, like you said, accessibility and security. A lot of times that's going to mean the requirement that we do have some culture change. So getting people used to using their phones to do multi-factor authentication, for example. A lot of folks are used to additional hurdles now that we've, since COVID, pivoted from attorneys doing the bulk of their work in the office to attorneys doing the bulk of their work, at least for some firms,
Mhm.
at home. So they're used to some technology change. A lot of that was imposed upon us by the pivot we had under COVID. But the reality is that attorneys have always traveled, and we've always needed to be able to provide that in some measure to some parts of the firm. So it's really coming up with and presenting the business case to the management partner or the executive committee, however the law firm's governed, to be able to say, yes, we can do this, whatever this is, provide remote access to all of the documents, and give them options. Here are 3 options. Here are the costs associated with each of those 3 options. And
Mhm.
here are the trade-offs in terms of functionality or ease of use. So it's not necessarily on security to make the decision about the platform, but rather come up with options that comply with security requirements we talked about before, the privacy, compliance, and so on, but also enable the attorneys to do their job. It's not a matter of, do we allow them? Because I worked with a firm not long ago, actually, where IT was rather inflexible. And we found that there was a lot, when we did an audit, we found that there was a lot of bypassing of the security controls.
Okay.
And we talked to some of the attorneys, or I talked to the attorneys to find out why they were doing this. And they said, at the end of the day, my job is to serve my clients. It's not to comply with my firm's regulations and requirements. If
Right.
I've served my clients and bring revenue in, they're going to overlook my non-compliance. Well, that isn't really an option. But I remember what he said. He said the firm hires smart lawyers, and then they're surprised when we figure out ways around the controls. Um, so, as security professionals, our job is to ensure that we provide them with the options to be able to do their job and then secure those options. And presenting, again, the executive committee, managing partner, whoever makes the decisions, with options that say, here are the things we can do, and these are the costs, and these are the trade-offs in terms of functionality.
Yeah. So I think related to that is my next question, and I've been thinking about uh, news stories, perhaps not on television news, but certainly in print or in print. Now I sound old. Online, digital, where law firms in high-profile cases are being named in those articles, which means they are a prime target for the, we'll call them evildoers. And so I think this next question, you've touched on it a bit, but maybe you can put a finer point on it. What role does cybersecurity play in safeguarding that client data in the law firm environments?
That is a great question. I mean, one of the things, think about what law firms do.
I'm
If
a
I
great podcaster. By the way, Robert, great question because I'm a great podcaster, just for our listeners. Go ahead. Go ahead. Great
um,
question. Here comes the great
you,
answer.
you are a great guy.
Yeah.
It, yeah, that's a great question because think about it. Think about what law firms do. Think about the data they have. A really easy example is intellectual property. If I'm an evildoer, maybe a state-sponsored actor, I won't name any names like in China or anything. But if I want to steal Apple's intellectual property, um, what's the easiest place to go? Do you think it's easier to penetrate Apple, or do you think it's easier to go after the law firm that does patent filings, for example, on behalf of Apple?
Right.
And in order to file a patent, if you're not familiar with that process, you need to be able to show that you have the technology, that it's novel, unique, and blah, blah, blah. There's all of these different requirements. But essentially, Apple will give all of this intellectual property to their law firm to enable that law firm to be able to get them a patent on this brand new, really cool technology around AI or something. If I want to steal that IP, it's much easier, and state actors have realized this, much easier to target the law firm who is in my parlance, we used to talk the slow fat rabbit, the easier target to go after. And
No offense to slow fat rabbits, by the way.
that's to rabbits.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably on GLP-1s now anyways, and skinny rabbits. But um, it's much easier to target the law firms. And a lot of law firms, I mean, we've recognized this. And the FBI issued a report years ago saying that law firms are the weak link in our intellectual property and trade secret and all these sorts of things that we have. So law firms are inherently going to be targets. Law firms have sensitive company data. Law firms have M&A data that hackers can use. Law firms have all of this data that the bad guys can use. So it's incumbent upon law firms to protect that data. If you are working in a large law firm or even a medium-sized law firm, you may not know this, but I can guarantee that your IT and security folks have gotten incessant and detailed and ever more penetrating questions from your clients about how you protect their data.
Mm.
And they're going to demand, increasingly, they're going to demand more stringent security requirements. I've got law firms that have gotten ISO 27001 certifications, SOC 2 certifications. I work as a virtual CISO for a small 50-person, it's global, but a small 50-person consulting firm. We are getting requirements that are as strict as we would have had for a Fortune 500 company 5 years ago. So we
Wow.
are now required to go through 200 question security audits from our big clients. Law firms are not exempt from this. And you will find that it is just the price of doing business. If you do not have the level of security as a law firm or really any other firm, you're going to find that you're going to be increasingly excluded from the opportunity to serve certain clients um, because they are concerned about their data, whether it is in their systems or it's given to their law firm to do work on their behalf.
Interesting. So I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole.
Picking up on fat rabbits again.
Yeah. But you talked about intellectual property and protection of it. And so there is an element where you need to demonstrate reasonable security measures being taken in certain types of cases, right? So does the reasonable security measures taken apply both to the organization, the company, the corporation, as well as the law firm? Are there situations where you've got to demonstrate that, yes, I sent this information, my law firm had it, and they took reasonable security measures?
The short answer is yes. Well, you know this. I've testified in front of the International Trade Commission. I've testified in federal court. I've testified in state courts on reasonable security measures and whether or not they had been taken in a number of different litigation matters. And actually, even in mediation and arbitration with JAMS, for example. But at the end of the day, the answer is yes. And because again, a company is responsible for its data. So if you have your customers' protected health information, or you have your customers or clients' PII, you're responsible for protecting that data. If you, as a firm, choose to transfer some of that data to a third party, whether it's a third party hosting service or a law firm, it is incumbent upon you to take responsibility for ensuring that that data is protected. That may mean auditing those third parties. If you have protected health information, as a law firm, you've probably already been asked to sign what's called a business associate agreement, which is
the BAA, the famous BAA.
Defined under HIPAA and the High Tech Act. That's an ancillary add-on to HIPAA. But absolutely, third parties are a part of your information system, information ecosystem. And it is incumbent upon you as a firm to understand how your data is protected, whether it's on your endpoints, your laptops, your servers, your cloud-hosted SaaS applications, or it's transferred to a third party like a law firm.
Wow. Okay. I want to make sure that we give some equal love to the world of information governance. So the last question was focused on cyber. Let me ask you this next one, focused on IG. Could you explain how implementing a robust information governance program or robust information governance practices can help law firms actually mitigate risks and enhance operational effectiveness?
Absolutely. So information governance, if you ask 10 IG professionals, you'll get 11 definitions of what it is. But at the end of the day, it's really around understanding what you have in terms of information, how you manage it, and what you can do to make it easier to manage it. So I'm just going to go with that definition. But good information governance, at the end of the day, what that means is you manage your data more effectively, more efficiently. That often means, especially at law firms who keep everything forever, that often means getting rid of lots and lots of data that is redundant, obsolete, trivial, called rot is the term we use.
Yeah.
But just like data that doesn't really have any substantive business value. When you get rid of data, you do a number of things. Number one, you make it easier for your end users in a law firm, your attorneys, to be able to find stuff. We've all had the experience of trying to search through millions and millions of documents to find the one that you know that is really valuable. If you've got a needle in a haystack and you've got tons and tons of garbage, it's much harder to find that really valuable document. So getting rid of stuff helps increase productivity. Getting rid of stuff from a security perspective also reduces what we call the attack surface. This is going to be really obvious when I say it, but the more stuff you have, the more things you have to do to protect it, especially the more places that it's in.
Sure.
You'll have data in backups. You'll have some firms still have data on tapes. You'll have data in cloud storage spaces. You'll have data in production systems. You'll have data all over the place.
It's
Understanding where it is and getting rid of stuff you no longer need reduces the attack surface and makes it easier to protect the data that you retain. And finally, just from a cost perspective, I've justified work on getting rid of stuff in IG simply through reducing our IT spend because we go from 15 terabytes down to 5 terabytes of data that we store, and we're paying less per month for that storage. So there's a lot of ways that good IG can pay for itself. Some of them easy to measure, like IT costs, some of them harder to measure, like productivity. But at the end of the day, we can spend less on security, we can spend less on storage, and we can make it easier to find the crown jewel kind of stuff that you have.
And you have just made me feel guilty for being the data hoarder that I am. And I feel like I need to clean it up. Not a law firm, but I still have data. So I think if I had a takeaway, it doesn't hurt for me to keep my data footprint clean as well. All right. So really interesting stuff so far, Robert. I want to ask you one last question. And that is, if there was one takeaway our listeners should have, just one, I wouldn't be able to do this. I like to talk, and I believe in the power of three. So I'm going to give you the chance to focus on just one. But if you throw in two, all right, one takeaway for our listeners.
I think the single most valuable thing that I work with clients on doing is trying to develop what I'm going to call a security culture. And what I mean by that is you get people to think about how they can protect the company's data in their day-to-day activities. And it may sound counterintuitive, but one of the easiest ways to do that is to do things that inspire them to change their behavior, not to serve the company, but for their own self-interest. And I'll just give you a couple easy examples. So for security training, one of the most important things a firm can do, I like to focus on things where people are excited for their own personal reasons. So in November, for example, I run security awareness training about how to shop safely online for this coming Christmas. And people sign up for that because they intend to shop online and they
Sure.
know people are getting scammed and they want to find ways to do it safely. Well, the lessons that I embed in that training are habits that they're going to use when they're going online for their personal stuff, but they'll also
Ah,
bring that to work.
right.
Another easy example of building the security awareness culture is I do this. Actually, I've got a class coming up on this in about 4 weeks for a client, is how to protect your kids when they go online and they're off from school this summer. So
Mm.
again, it's a focus on habits that they're going to use for personal gain, or in this case, to protect their kids. But people sign up for that class in droves. They can't wait. They'll make time in their day to attend that class,
Wow.
as opposed to me forcing them to come to other security awareness training classes.
Sure.
But in that class, again, they're going to learn habits about how to think about security and how to secure their devices. And those are habits, again, they'll bring to work. And what you'll find is that over time, you can move the needle in terms of security awareness. So people think about not just doing their jobs, but how do I do my job? How do I do this activity in a secure way? And all of those good habits then can build up over time.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a fantastic takeaway. And I think those types of trainings, Robert, are really wonderful. And as you said, serve two purposes. So excellent. Well, I want to thank Robert for joining us today, as well as our regular subscribers, those that may be our first-time listeners. If you'd like to learn more about IDS or want to subscribe to our IDS Talks podcast, you can visit idsinc.com or wherever you normally get your podcasts from. If you want to reach out to Robert, please go to the IDS Inc. ids.com website, we have a listing of all of our team members, and you can engage him in that way. Just do it in a safe, secure fashion, and don't attempt to try to phish him. Thank you again for joining us. I look forward to talking more about data with you on our next edition of IDS Talks.